Is the motion for approval of the agenda, please? Jim?
I move approval of the agenda with the addition of an HR addendum to be added to item 5C under the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Let's see here. We were thinking that David Paulson is going to be on the phone, but we're not sure. David, are you there? He might join us a little bit later. Robin indicated that she wasn't feeling well and wasn't sure if she was going to be able to be here. So we will continue on with our agenda. The first item, next item is the recognition of the audience, and we do have one person that has signed up to speak with us this evening. David, are you on the phone?
I am.
Okay, great. We're just at the recognition of audience portion of the agenda. Tracy Wilkie, if you'd like to make your way to the podium. I will just say that we ask that you speak to address the board, you state your name and your address for the record, and that you will refrain from using this forum to criticize or complain about a specific employee or student by name. Vulgar or profane language will not be tolerated. The board is interested in your comments and will listen carefully, but is not obligated to respond to or debate issues in this forum. Should you desire a written response to a specific question, you may request it. This evening, I will give you 4 minutes to speak. Upon conclusion of your time, a chime will sound and the speaker, you will be asked to conclude. And if it is necessary, a final chime will sound 15 seconds later, signifying the end of your time at the podium. Go ahead, Tracy. Welcome.
Bonjour, I am Tracy L. Wilkie, Wabishki, Geweden, Ikwe, a citizen of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa and a resident of Fargo. I'm a new employee to the North Dakota Federations of Families for Children's Mental Health, and I would like to take a couple minutes to tell you about our organization. The North Dakota Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health.
We look for enacted on the spot. Then if we look at the next slide, those are domains 2, 3, and 4. Domain 2 being planning and preparing, and then domain 3, that's reflecting on teaching, and then finally domain 4, collegiality and professionalism. And again, within these 4 domains, we have 60 elements. All 60 elements have been open to be rated on by principals. So they can choose to have building goals on what elements might be rated on. They can choose to, if they're working with a teacher on any particular element, they can really rate on any of these elements within the 4 domains in 60. The next slide, this is what's submitted to the Department of Public Instruction, and that's due by June 30th. Every year, we rated on 997 teachers. And on the bottom, if I could focus our attention, that scale, we have innovating 4, applying 3, developing 2, beginning 1, and then not using 0. Those are how the elements are rated. As we're going to see here, most of our results are within that level 3 and level 2, with about 91% of our results in there. In 1920, the numbers are a little bit lower, but we'll remember that DPI did eventually not require us to conduct evaluations on Category 1 teachers. COVID hit. It was just difficult for the districts to get those evaluations done. So we will see less ratings. We'll see there the total ratings, 6,066, compared to this year, 7,024. And then again, if we look at 2021 or 2020, 2021, total level 4 about 7%. It's about the same as last year. Total level 3, and that's where most of the ratings live, a little bit higher than the previous year. And then total level 2, it was 15% of our ratings. Last year were there, and now 10%. And then level 1 or 0. So every year, when the principals do finish by April 15th, the Human Resources Office, we report each building's results into DPI. And then we also generate this aggregate report. And this is the total district results, but they are reported out at a building level into DPI each year. And then finally, plans for the future. So over the last year, and maybe a little bit more, the Marzano Evaluation Committee, which did exist in years past, and we reassembled, consisting of principals, administrators, teachers, and other staff. And those will be kind of a shout out there at the end of the slide. We got together and really asked, are we staying with our current legacy model? Is that serving its purpose? Is that creating an effective evaluation experience? Or are we looking at something different, like this Marzano focused teacher evaluation model? So what the group did ultimately decide is we will move to the new FTEM model effective school year 22-23, and that's going to give us a little bit of time to do some professional development before we do move into that model. Some of the key objectives of the Marzano focused teacher evaluation model: it simplifies the overall evaluation process, and we're going to see in the, I think it's on the next slide, there's 23 elements instead of 60. So it really doesn't get rid of any of the 60 elements. What it does is it provides a crosswalk in groups, and I have a sheet here, and you don't have that in front of you, but for instance, and I will get to it on the next slide, the first element in the FTEM model, the crosswalk of our current model, would include elements 1, 9, 42, 43, and 44. So it really condenses those elements and just makes it simpler for that teacher and that principal to have a more meaningful evaluation. Reduces time and complexity burden, increases specificity, accuracy of observations, prioritizes deeper alignment to the instructional shifts, and then incorporates stronger diagnostic feedback capabilities for teachers. These are the domains within the FTEM model. So standards-based planning, and that's up in blue, and this is a little bit small again in the writing, a little bit blurry. Standard-based instruction, and then conditions for learning and professional responsibilities. So again, when I was talking about that crosswalk, that first bullet point under blue, the planning standards-based lesson and units, those contain about 5 of the elements that we currently have, and they're now wrapped into that element's observation. But it's really a more simpler, instead of having 60 elements to work through, they'll now have 23. Professional development plans specific to the FTEM transition. We really debated, should that transition happen this new fiscal year, so starting July 1, or are things that we really need to work on and delay that start until fiscal year 23. So the summer of 2021, this summer, we're going to review essential need-to-knows of the evaluation process with principals. We're going to look at the required number of observations and pre and post conferences, and we talked about that earlier. And all of those things are really the nuts and bolts of what goes into an evaluation, all contained in our teacher evaluation handbook. For school year 21-22, we're going to calibrate with principals. So we're really working on, principals certainly have the freedom to evaluate on the elements that they need to, but also those set by the district. And also those building goals, but how do we continue to work so that principals, when they're evaluating on, let's say, that first element, planning standards-based lesson and units, that they're looking for the same types of things, and so that teachers can expect the same kind of review when they're looking at that element from principal to principal and building to building. School year 21-22, again, crosswalk of current domains and elements. And that's that crosswalk. What are our 60 elements? How do they fit into the 23 elements now? And our teaching and learning department will take those principals through that. And then create training modules for future principals and teachers. And then finally, summer and school year 22-23, the calibration training is going to continue with the principals. And then we'll ask the principals to start training the teachers on this new model. We'll train principals in giving feedback to teachers, and then also train the teachers in this crosswalk and provide training modules to be completed during that school year as well. So it's really kind of a 2-year process where we train the raters and train the trainers, and then that's filtered to the teachers. I'd certainly be remiss if I didn't include the Marzano Evaluation Committee. There was a lot of talent on that committee, and it took 3 slides. So I won't go and name everybody here, but we'll see here that We really tried to assemble across secondary and elementary buildings, different teacher disciplines, a good crew that could work and really evaluate this. So this slide contains all teachers. If I go to the next one, that's mostly teachers, and then starts getting into a little bit of the HR team and administration. And then finally, the last slide, which is all administration. So that is the group that really moved us to the new FTM model and took a good look at what we're doing, how we want to get to the new FTM model, and what kind of professional development we're going to do to get there. That concludes my presentation, so I'd take any questions if there are any, or I'd be happy to divert them over to Dr. Bob Gross too. So,
Yeah, thank you, Doug.
You bet.
Any board members have questions? Comments? Dr. Newman?
Thank you for this, Doug. I think you answered it here toward the end, but I guess I was just curious who performs the evaluations? Is it always just the building principal? Is it ever outside parties or other parties? Because some of this just seems a little subjective, so I was just curious if it's always the same person evaluating?
It's chiefly the building principal. It can be an assistant principal as well. It can be a dean at our elementary. They can perform an observation. But as far as the evaluation piece of it, that's usually going to be your head building principal. Yep.
So everyone performing these evaluations would go through this training you were referencing?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, wonderful. And then how is the feedback given to the teachers? Is it a written summative, form, or do they meet in person and discuss the results, or how does that work?
Yeah, so like our formal observations where we require a pre and a post conference, that principal will meet with that teacher, discuss the elements that they will be rating and the look-fors. And then also after that, and it doesn't have to be necessarily right after the observation, but they'll meet again. But it can be provided by email, but most of it is put into what's called our iObservation platform, and that contains our evaluation model. And that feedback is put in there as written feedback. And then each teacher at the end of the year gets that summative evaluation. That's where you'll find all the feedback and all the ratings throughout the year.
Anyone else have questions? All right, thank you. The next item would be a report from the FEA. We don't have anyone here, I believe, for a report there. The next item then is the superintendent's report. Dr. Gandhi.
Yeah, I don't have anything major, just summer school's underway. I think later today we'll probably touch base on some of the things that you'll be approving in the business item as well. For us, we're just really kind of focusing on the ESSER funds and the management of that and what that's going to look like in our district moving forward as we plan for this summer as well. So you'll be, in the business section today, we'll be discussing the ESSER 2 application that's part of that process. Earlier today, Jackie and I were notified that our district has been approved for the ESSER 3 funding as well. So we're just going to continue with the process for making those plans. And that's pretty much it. Just want to thank the board members and all of our staff for an incredible school year. I don't think this school year was what anyone expected it to be, but I think our staff have shown just the incredible work ethic they have and the dedication to our students. So as we are now into the summer, I just want to acknowledge all of their hard work, and I hope the board recognizes that this past year our staff have gone above and beyond, and truly the successes that we had this year is because of a reflection of them. So.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Is there a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Jim? Is there a second? By Seth? Okay. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. The business section of our agenda starts with the health insurance premium recommendation, memo 139. That comes from our health insurance committee. Is Karen here? Karen Hullerung, the chair of that committee. Jackie, go ahead.
Karen is not here. Is Shannon? I don't think she is here either tonight. So I think Jim will take it for us.
Go ahead, Jim.
The Health Insurance Committee, working with our district's consultant, Gallagher and Associates, after we made a decision, which the board approved, to shift to health partners for the coming calendar year for health insurance, not school year, Also looked at what we need to do on premiums. The plan itself looks to be just about breaking even this year. We might come out with a little extra going into our fund balance, which is low right now. Theoretically, we'd like to have enough in fund balance for probably 3 to 6 months of claims. So the committee's been trying to build that back up. Their recommendation, which I agree with wholeheartedly, is that we'll increase both employer and employee contributions on both of the plans, regardless of how they've enrolled, by 5%, and maintain the current HSA employer contribution level for $1,000 for a single, $1,250 for a single plus dependent, and $1,500 for a family. Now, keep in mind, over the coming year, we're going to be discussing possibly changing the high deductible plan, maybe moving to only one plan, and certainly we'll probably be talking about future HSA contributions as well. But for the coming calendar year, 2022, that is the recommendation. And I'll make a motion that we approve the Health Insurance Committee's recommendation for a 5% funding level increase and maintenance of the HSA contribution limits.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second by Dr. Newman. Any discussion, any questions? Okay. Anne Marie, would you please call the roll?
Paulson?
Yes.
Benson? Yes. Gullickson?
Yes.
Holden?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Brian Nelson?
Yes.
Newman?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes, motion passes. Second item under business is SR2 application memo 140. And that comes from Jackie Gap and Dr. Gandhi. Who would like to kick that off? Jim wants to talk about it. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion so we can get this moving. I'd like to move that we approve the SR2 application and direct administration to submit it to the North Dakota Department of Public Instruction.
Second.
There's a tie for second. Okay, I'm going to give a second to Brian. Any discussion, questions? Jackie?
If I may, we did notice some things that we needed to change on that application, including just the dates, because it'll be signed tonight, hopefully, as well as some of the check boxes and where the budget actually will be for SR2. Between the two pots of money with SR2 and SR3, we have to make that determination of what we're going to use under which one. And so we kind of have gone through that and looked, and so there's just some narrative changes related to that. So I guess I would, ask if you would want to receive that updated copy for all of you as well.
As in this evening, or when would you, when would that be
I'm going to maybe
available?
look to Anne Marie as to what that would look like.
Anne Marie?
I think it depends on how you want to handle that, as someone could make an amendment to approve it with whatever additions that are made. Does this need to be approved by a specific time, Jackie?
It does. June 24th is the date in my mind, potentially.
Rupag?
Yeah, I think I've kind of gone through this in the past as well. I mean, I think the board can make a motion to, as if Jackie and I can just talk you through some of the changes. Jackie's already mentioned most of them that we just caught after the meeting materials were submitted. And one is a good piece of feedback that we received from a board member, which was instead of saying that the district's receiving a certain amount of funds, just clarify that the district is being reimbursed, because there are some parameters that we have to meet as well. I think the board can probably make a motion to approve the application with the changes that have been presented by Jackie and I think that would probably cover us.
Do we need some more discussion on these changes in terms of specifics? Dr. Newman?
I would just like to see them. I mean, I would appreciate them emailed out if we vote on that tonight.
Okay, I think because I think the biggest thing is we had written in a lot of the employees that we will be hiring, and actually we would like those in ESSER 3, because that's for 3 years, so we don't have to move people back and forth. So that really is the majority of the change, although the premise of what those employees are going to be hired to do regarding learning loss and social emotional supports, and those types of services, it will still exist in ESER two. It just may be more related to professional development, some additional curriculum and software. So it all ties together. It's just a matter of where we're going to be placing the cost of the employees versus the other costs.
Jennifer?
Thank you. Jackie, the positions that are highlighted and that you just talked about, are they going to be listed as temporary?
So any positions, whether they be support staff or certified, we're really taking a three-pronged approach. One, in our application system frontline, we're issuing them as some of those positions may be subject to non-renewal. And any positions backfilling, we'd work on, that are internal, we'd work on returning those staff back to similar types of positions. Any contracts that are issued or salary statements if they're support staff will have that similar language. And then we're also asking the principals to help us with that communication as we put staff in place.
Dr. Gandhi?
Just to touch base on that, I think it's important to recognize some of the parameters that the district has to work on with both ESER 2 and ESER 3 funds. So we are going to be required to maintain a maintenance of effort report as well. That's going to be twofold. One part of that is on an annual basis, we want to take a look at whether the ESER funds our initiatives using the ESER funds are accomplishing their intended goals, specifically addressing learning loss. So that's one of the reasons why any position that is funded through ESER funds, we're notifying that staff early on that that's subject to non-renewal on an annual basis. One of the initiatives using all three ESER funds that we have that we are going to look at is a program evaluation and hire a staff member that can make sure that they're managing this grant appropriately, because we do have a fiduciary responsibility with the dollars that have been given to us, and also do an evaluation on each of the programs to make sure that they're meeting those intended purposes. So I think that's one of the reasons as well. So, and then the second piece is sustainability. We can't guarantee as a district that the positions that we're going to hire with ESER are going to be long-term positions, because those aren't things that we've budgeted for at this point. So that's why we're also communicating that they'll be subject to an annual non-renewal.
All right, we have a motion and a second in front of us, and there has been the suggestion there could be an amendment. Jim?
I'd like to have it written out for our board secretary.
That sounds good. Thank you. Go ahead, Jim.
I'd like to make an amendment to my motion. I'd like to insert language after ESER 2 application. So it would read, approve the ESER 2 application, and here's the amendment, with modifications based upon ESER 3 funds to maximize the dollars available for reimbursement to the district, and direct the administration to submit to the North Dakota Department of Instruction.
Is there a
Second.
second? There's a second by Brian. Any discussion, questions? Jackie, does that address your concerns, do you feel?
I believe so.
Okay, any questions by board members? Anne Marie, please call the roll.
This will be for approving of the amendment.
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson. Yes. Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
yes,
Knutson.
Yes, the amendment passes. Jennifer, have a question?
I do, if I may now, before we vote on the final motion, if I may ask a question specific to, this is an application, and so there is not necessarily a guarantee for all these monies, correct?
I'm going to defer to Jackie. She's probably been in touch with DPI more than I have.
We have been awarded the money, or we will upon this, so the money is guaranteed assuming that we are following all the rules, and but we will incur all the costs and then submit for that reimbursement at that time. So we do not have to submit a formal budget ahead of time like we do on our consolidated applications and our other grants that we have every year. This is kind of a incur as you go and submit for reimbursement.
May I ask a
Go ahead.
follow-up? Thank you. A follow-up question then to that. So what if we don't meet the intended goals that we have set out or that the grant has set out for the funds? Then what happens?
As long as we are utilizing the funds under the purposes stated, we will be reimbursed. A part of our application and evaluation, especially with the one position we're looking to hire, will help us determine, and I'm going to look to my instructional leaders there, that we are meeting the goals of what we intended, and if not, then what do we need to do? So I don't know if you want to add. I didn't probably say that as eloquently as you would.
Dr. Gross or Missy, do you have anything to add?
I think we've been very purposeful as we've designed some of the projects that they will meet those requirements. In addition, we have made sure that the data that will be required to be submitted to the state are part of that process. So again, as we have designed the projects, we've been very purposeful, and then they are discussed at cabinet to again double check to make sure that all of those would be those that would be approved through this process.
Brian?
You know, in reading through the grant application, and I'm also confident too that they've talked to a lot of different stakeholders as well. And so there's been some input given to them, I'm sure, as to what they would like to be seen done with the monies and things like that. So I guess I'm comfortable.
Anyone else have questions? Anne Marie, please, would you please read the motion again, and then we will vote?
You are approving the motion of, that you're approving the ESSER 2 application with a modification based upon ESSER 3 funds to maximize the dollars available for the district and direct administration to submit the North Dakota and a direct administration to submit to the North Dakota Department of Public Instruction.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson. Paulson? Did we lose him? We might have lost him. Benson?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Oh, no, we couldn't. Paulson?
Yes.
Benson?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes, motion passes. The next item is Memo 141 regarding the Explorer Academy Plant ID. This also comes from Jackie Gap and Dr. Gandhi. I could entertain a motion, or you may introduce. Brian?
I would make a motion that we authorize administration to request a plant ID number for the Explorer Academy program opening for the 2022 school year located at Lewis and Clark Elementary School.
Is there a second? Second by Nikki. Any discussion? Dr. Gandhi, Jackie, anything to add?
This is strictly operational. We, by process with the Department of Public Instruction, anytime we're requesting a new public ID, we need to get board approval. For us, we are requesting to do that just to make, honestly, it's for operational efficiency, just so we can make sure that the Explorer Academy, whether it's budgeting, ADM calculations, and things of that nature, it has its own planned ID, so we can track and, for accounting purposes, human resource purposes, IT purposes as well. If not, each student would still be tied to their home school and power school for ADM purposes, and it just wouldn't be as clean when we're reporting our data.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Any questions? Okay, Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
President Knudsen?
Yes, motion passes. The next item is memo 142 regarding GP7 monitoring. GP7, for those of you that aren't familiar, has to do with the structure of the board's standing committees. And we review those committees on an annual basis. The 5 standing committees of the board are negotiations, communications, engagement, and advocacy, government relations, what else? Planning, and governance. And so this is a memo from the chair of the governance committee, from myself, and there is a recommendation on this memo. If there is a motion, I would take that, and we can, in a second, then discussion. Dr. Newman?
I'd like to make a motion that that we pass the board policy GP7 be reaffirmed or provided, as provided or as modified.
Second.
All right, there's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Jennifer?
Thank you. So since this is in front of us here for discussion, I'll bring it up, and I believe I've noted this before. I would like to hear others' opinions on the fact that the board, or the committees, do have 5 members of the board currently serving on them, which actually means there is a quorum of the board. And at a committee level, our structure is that a committee makes recommendations to the full board, not decisions on behalf of the board. And I believe that we have run into examples where that has sort of been circumvented because there is a majority on a committee. So I do think that perhaps we should discuss that structure a little bit. I'd love to hear some of your opinions.
Anyone have any comments, thoughts to share? Seth?
I see your concern. I've ran into this before in committees where I'm like, well, we got 5 of us that agree we're probably gonna pass this. But just because you have 5 people on a committee doesn't necessarily always guarantee that all 5 of those members are gonna agree. You know, there very well could be one person that's like, I don't know if I agree with that, but if that's gonna be the board or the committee's recommendation, then the committee can recommend that, and then I, or whoever the 5th person would be that doesn't agree, can definitely not vote that way when it gets brought to the full board. So that's just my opinion. It's not guaranteed that all 5 people are gonna completely agree in that committee.
Dr. Newman, I see your hands up, but did someone else have their hand up on the other side of the room? Nikki? Okay, all right.
Thank you,
Dr.
Seth.
Newman.
Yeah, I think I would just add too that I think in my year on the board so far, I've been surprised, I guess, at how much work happens on these committees, and they are very important. And it would be my opinion that the more voices and the more diverse opinions we have on those, the better the outcome. So I welcome, at least 5 members, and I agree with what you said as well, Seth.
Jim?
Well, just a little background. At one time, our committees only had 3 board members on them. And then one day, a mayor for the city of Fargo invited the chair of our planning committee and our business manager to come over to the mayor's office to have a discussion about legislative priorities for the city and the school district. And the chair of that planning committee knew that they weren't going to be able to really carry through with all of the information, so they invited another member of the planning committee. So we had 2 members of the planning committee and the business manager, and actually we had the district's attorney at this meeting as well. And one of the board members actually asked the district attorney, did we notice this meeting? Do we have to notice this? And they said, no, this is not a committee meeting. This is a requested meeting from the mayor's office, and you're not operating as a committee, so no need to. So we had that meeting, only later to have the forum put in a request through the AG's office that it violated open meeting laws because the school district didn't notice that 2 members of the planning committee, which was a majority of the planning committee at the time, were at this meeting. So the minutes of that meeting had to be recreated, and no real bad thing happened because of it. What we learned was that if you only have 3 people on a committee, anytime 2 of them are together, you have the majority of the committee, and you're supposed to notice that if there's any kind of discussion possibly of business going on. So that's why we shifted to 5. That's just the background of how we got from 3 to 5 on our committees.
Jennifer?
Thank you. I'd like to add on to that because I've read that AG opinion, and this is something that I do think is of big concern. So in the interest of gathering information and history, I read that AG opinion, and the reason we were in violation is not necessarily because it was just a majority of the planning. It was whether or not we direct 1 member or 2 members to do business on behalf of the board. It doesn't matter at that point whether it's a quorum of the board. It's that they're doing business on behalf of the board and coming back reporting. We're using it in our decision-making. That makes it subject to an open meeting law. And so it doesn't matter if we have 3 or 5 or all 9 of us. If we direct anyone, and that's the same thing that happened with the COVID task force. We had 1 member, but we had an alternate member, and there were 2 people. That's not a majority of the board or any of the committees, but yet it was still subject to open meeting laws. So, that may have been the belief then, but that's not of what the opinion says. And so I do think that that's not really a factor at play here. And to Dr. Newman's point around as many voices as possible, because of all the work that gets done at committee level, I would say I don't have a problem with that, but then we shouldn't be saying non-committee members can't participate, and can't participate, and show up, especially if it's a topic that they have additional information on to be able to share. So then we should remove that in our wording, in our language, in terms of allowing them to verbally participate in a committee meeting.
And of course, some specific language could be recommended if there needs to be, if you're recommending or if anyone else wants to recommend any changes to this GP, that definitely could be brought forward. I have had some conversations with Amy DeCook at the North Dakota School Boards Association. As you know, she's the attorney for that association. We have talked about committee makeup and the number of people on a committee, purpose of a committee, and of course, looking into our own policy regarding the purposes of our committee. Every board could have different committee purposes, but our committee purposes are not to do the work for the board, but to assist the board in doing its work, to help research and gather information and provide recommendations then to the full board to consider. Each committee does operate a little bit differently, Jennifer, as you have mentioned, and that could be something that we decide that we want to take a look at. I don't see I personally don't see a problem with 5 people serving on a board, on a committee. There's a lot of work that needs to happen by all of our committees on behalf of the important work of the district. I don't see why we would need more committee members. An odd number seems to be a good amount to have instead of an even number. Amy DeCock just really advised that we all try to work to be on the same page in terms of what the purposes of the committee are. And that it is to do the work, help the board do its work, but not do the work of the board. And all of those committee meetings are publicly noticed. So anyone from the public is able to attend the meetings. Board members are able to attend the meetings. We have talked before as members of the general public at that point if we want to gather information. Also, we've talked previously more than once about the ability for a committee chair to welcome an additional person from the board to the committee to provide additional information if that seems deemed necessary, or a member from the public. Sometimes we have architects come in and provide plans to us regarding some details, that come in front of the planning committee, for example. So also we have talked about that if a board member has a specific question or interest or information to share with the committee chair. We've had that conversation recently. So as a vehicle to to funnel the information and not to withhold information, but to be able to work within our committee structure effectively and appropriately. So I don't hear any specific language that it would come through in terms of a change. Is there anything to be offered right now, or is that something that a board member could bring down the road? Certainly a board member could bring down the road. I know we have governance committee meeting minutes that we could be looking at too, where we have discussed this previously and decided to stick with our current structure. Jim?
I don't think we have a motion on the floor, do we?
I don't believe we do, because this was,
Dr. Newman moved that the board
Oh, I'm
policy
sorry,
GP7
Dr.
be
Newman?
reaffirmed as
I
provided.
stepped out of the room, that's why I wasn't sure.
there you go. That's what happens. Okay, we do have a motion and a second, which is why we are discussing.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? Jennifer?
So because there have been examples where committees have made basically decisions on behalf of the board, and to Seth's point, I'm not saying it happens all the time, but it does happen. And we haven't necessarily addressed them as a full board. So perhaps there could be language added in here for that process. If indeed that occurs, then here's, how we remedy it. That would be one suggestion. Or again, maybe we explore, is there a better way? For those committees that are, for example, governance, I think is where, a couple examples where it has happened, where decisions are being made without coming to the full board for discussion versus just being a recommendation. Because here's where I'm going with that. Our policy already says that it's supposed to be a recommendation. And so when we're not following that, then what? Nothing's happening.
So there is a recommendation on this memo that reads that board policy GP7 be reaffirmed as provided or as modified. I'm not hearing any specific words for modification right now. I'd like us to be able to move through this business item. That doesn't mean that even if it's approved tonight as is, that doesn't mean that change can't happen down the road and that some specific language can't be suggested for changes. Any other questions or discussion? Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
No.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes, motion passes. The next item is the assignment of the canvassing committee. It's memo 143. That also comes from governance. There are two officers that serve for the board, the president and the vice president, and every year we have the opportunity to have an election. And this memo is regarding the assignment of a canvassing committee. The committee members for that are those persons serving on governance that are not in a president or vice president, serving currently in a president or vice president role. So this memo discusses then that Nikki Gullickson, Jim Johnson, and David Paulson would serve as the 2021 canvassing committee. I have visited with Nikki and she has agreed to serve as chair of that committee. She would then work with the other committee members to contact all board members. All board members are available to serve in both of those roles. You just need to have 1 year of service on the board, and we all have met that at this point, or will have met that. So I would entertain a motion to move forward according to this memo. Tracy?
I'd like to make a motion that Nikki Gullickson, Jim Johnson, and David Paulson serve as the 2021 canvassing committee as stipulated in policy, with Nikki Gullickson serving as chair of the committee, and report their findings to Anne Marie Campbell by June 23rd.
Is there a second? There's a second by Seth. Any discussion or questions? Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
President Knutson,
Yes, motion passes. The last item on business is GP 12, process for addressing board member violations, and that is memo 144. That also comes from the governance committee. There are a few paragraphs here on this memo that explain to us why we are here today regarding this. Ties into our policies regarding board member violations and representing decisions of the board as a whole. And so there's some history on the memo that you have all been privy to that explains why we're here today. And the governance committee met and discussed basically this same information, and that committee decided to bring the discussion to the full board, which is why we're here today. And so I want to offer up, all board members the opportunity to have discussion on this, especially those that don't serve on governance, that haven't had the opportunity to also be a part of the discussion. And Jennifer, give you an opportunity to have some discussion on this as well. I am going to pass out the communication that Jennifer and I shared that led up to this process, and I believe I have enough handouts for everyone. There are 2 pages there. I don't necessarily know Dr. Gross and Missy and Jackie and Doug if you need a handout or not, but there might be enough for you. And really what it does is it outlines a timeline. It explains conversations that Jennifer and I had regarding adhering to board policy, which is basically regarding the decision on the Smart Restart Plan for this school year and embracing the mitigation, all the mitigation procedures that staff and students of the district and anyone being in the district buildings needs to undertake as mitigation procedures. And that is according to the Smart Restart Plan that the board approved prior to the school year starting. So I would open up this as an opportunity. I've had lots of conversations with Jennifer already. I'd open up this as an opportunity for board members to share in the dialogue when you are ready. I would also like to say that there are, I would say, people on both sides of this issue. There are certainly people that don't feel as if all mitigation procedures were necessary during COVID. That has been certainly communicated by members of our community. That, however, was not the decision of the Smart Restart Plan and the decision of the board in starting the school year and continuing the school year. We have also heard from students, parents, and staff that have a hard time understanding why it is that the procedure does, or that the policy doesn't need to be followed by all board members when it is something that was approved by the board. So I want to acknowledge that there are thoughts and beliefs on both sides, and still that this is something that, according to our board policies, that we need to have a discussion about.
Madam President?
Yes, David?
Just so everyone is clear, this all stems from the fact that one of the board members did not wear masks at our school board meetings. Is that correct?
Yes, it does.
I guess I have this question maybe more directed to administration, but were there instances during this year when staff members or students did not wear masks in our buildings? And how were those situations handled?
Thank you for your question, David. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Gandhi first, and then Dr. Gandhi, if you would, if there's someone else that could better answer the question, then go ahead. Dr. Gandhi.
Sure, and David, I'll just preface what I'm about to say by saying administration is going to simply respond to your question. This really is a board issue, so But in our process throughout this school year, if there was a student or staff member that was unable to comply by any of the mitigation strategies, we asked for a medical exemption that HR could have on file and provide that accommodation accordingly. And that was the way that we addressed that issue. And if there was a student that refused to wear a mask, then we talked to that student. We worked with them to make sure that either we provided one for them or whatever the case might be. That was part of our expectations. And to my knowledge, I don't think we've had anything that's gone beyond that point.
Does anyone from administration have anything to add to help clarify? Okay, David, does that answer your question?
Just, Madam President, if I could just follow up. Thank you, Dr. Gandhi, for explaining that. Were there any situations where people refused to wear a mask and refused to share their medical information due to privacy, to HIPAA laws?
Who would like to answer that?
I'll ask Doug to see if there's anyone that notified him. I don't know that. I mean, that's obviously a question for building administrations as well, if there were any students that just outright refused. I know that our building principals worked hard with those students to find accommodations, whether it was providing them an environment where they were socially distanced or whatever the case may be. But I don't have the answer to that right now. That would be a question for our principals.
And
Doug?
from a personnel standpoint, I didn't have anything in my recollection that came to my office of that type of situation where there was a refusal.
We have also had, or I also had the conversation and shared this at governance. Again, I'm going to reference Amy DeCock, who is the attorney for the North Dakota School Boards Association. And as members of the board, as elected members of the board, we sit kind of in between two spaces the way I see it. And as Amy advised me on this as well, as how to look at this. And I want to make sure too that we're not only talking about the mitigation procedures and masking, we're talking about board policy and adherence to board policy and representing decisions of the board as a whole, which is something that when a person runs for the Board of Education and then ends up being elected and serves, we are to follow our policies. And so that's something that we know and that they're outlined for us. And so that's really why we're here today, because this is an example of that. Any rate, getting back to my discussion with Amy DeCock, she basically said, we're in between, as board members, we're in between the general public and staff. We're not the general public because although we're members of the general public, so are staff. Staff, we're all members of the general public, but we serve in different ways. And so we're elected to serve on the Board of Education. We have the ability and the opportunity to sit here and make decisions and vote on items that come in front of us. We're not staff members. We do have compensation from the district. We do have compensation from our taxpayers, as do staff members. We do not receive other benefits from the school district. We don't have vacation, we don't have health insurance, those types of things. So we're clearly not staff. But if we look at our opportunity to serve and where we fit from member of the general public to staff, and how members of our students and our staff were required to comply with the mitigation procedures for COVID-19 for the Fargo School District, the advice from Amy DeCock was we look at ourselves closer to staff, not that we are, but that we align ourselves closer to staff and look at what would we ask our staff members to do. And so we've talked today about what we would ask our staff members to do. And that was offered to Ms. Benson as an opportunity, and it was indicated to me that, you know, that medical information wasn't going to be provided. So I just wanted to clear that up and talk about that and give some outside advice and look into this as well. So really, when it comes down to it, we're talking about policy. And I'd like us to be able to get back to policy as much as possible. Jennifer, do you have anything to add?
I do. So I guess my question is this. So if your policy actually disregards federal law, you're still going to try to enforce the policy? and ignore the law? So if we have an illegal policy, we're still bringing it to this level.
Seth, and then I may have a comment after that.
I would have a question for you, Jennifer. What court deemed this policy illegal?
Federal law protects an individual's rights. You cannot demand that I produce medical information. I am, as Rebecca stated, not an employee of the district. And so it would be like you walking into a business without a mask and them demanding that you provide a medical exception form. They can't do that.
I would push back on the employee of the district. I receive a W-9 from the federal government. Or a W-2, sorry. I receive a W-2 from the federal government for the work that I do for the school district. I would assume that you did too. And according to the federal government and the Internal Revenue Service, that makes you an employee of the district.
That's not true according to the lawyer and the law. So just because they pay us salary, it works like that. I didn't make the law, Seth, but that is the law. I am not an employee of the district. And we've been down this road with other violations prior to your tenure here, and that was the rationale given. So again, they can't apply a rule, or a said rule, in one case and not another.
I have a comment on that, and I am passing some information through, again, from Amy DeCock that addresses this. We do get into new territory with COVID-19. And is there specific case law yet, as she has said, regarding all issues that have come up regarding COVID-19? No. There was legislation brought up at the North Dakota legislature that would have made it illegal for school districts to issue, or public entities such as the school district to issue a mask mandate. That did not pass. Requiring staff and students and persons entering a public building, not only ours, but say city property like the library, city hall, is not something that is prevented. It is not something that is against our ability to be able to do that. We have the ability when there are extreme health concerns, global health concerns, to issue requirements to help ensure the safety of everyone that's in our buildings, and this is part of that. And again, we're getting back to policy. The policy that talks about representing the decision of the full board. The decision of the full board was to approve the Smart Restart Plan for the school year. And masking was simply one of the mitigation procedures, in addition to social distancing, hand sanitization, air filtration, so lots of different slices of cheese, as we've talked about it before, to help build a good, strong defense against COVID-19. So it's, well, we're getting into the masking part, obviously, but it's still going back to policy. So our discussion today is about, do we feel that it is important to adhere to that policy or not? We're talking about it here, and it seemed, I think that since we are talking about it here, it shows that, yes, we do feel it is important. I don't believe it would have moved from the governance committee to here for the full board if we didn't believe it was important. And what we need to decide is our discussion today where we leave it, or do we move to another step? And I will leave that up to other board members to move the discussion along. Jennifer, did you have your hand up?
Sure, I'd just like to add to that in one of Amy DeCock's responses that you'd passed out at governance, in her email, it says, when she is attempting to answer around your question, if you have the ability to make these sort of mandates, it says, where appropriate to reduce risk. And I think it's important to point out that the board has even acknowledged that this isn't about health and safety, It's really just about me being forced to follow a policy that, in my opinion, should have expired a long time ago. And when we sit here and listen to the effects that it's had on some of the students, and yet we spend hours talking about the fact that I'm standing up for those individuals' rights as well. I can't believe that we haven't spent our time talking about the seriousness around what those parents have told us. And that we are sitting here making these decisions for these medical interventions for, you all pretend to know my situation or a student situation or anyone in this room situation. We are not under a state of emergency. And you cannot say that I pose risk. You have all said, like you have said, you are not afraid. You are not, this isn't about whether or not you think that you're going to get COVID or give it to me. So then why? Is it really just about power, control? I mean, when does it end?
We're going to conduct, we're going to continue with the business of our meeting. Thank you for being here. Jim?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. First of all, Seth is spot on. If you check with the IRS, they'll tell us all we're employees of the district, hence we got a W-2 instead of a 1099. I get both, and I understand the law pretty well, Jennifer. Personally, I think we've discussed this about as far as we need to. Clearly, we had a board member that chose to not follow the policy we put in place. That's a violation of board policy, but beyond that, I think we've discussed it, and let's move on. We've got negotiations. I need a lot of time for executive session.
Anyone else have anything to share? Dr. Newman?
Clarifying question. So does someone need to make a motion to move to step 4? To then, I mean, we're on step 3, discussing in a public meeting, or how does it work to move to publicly censure?
It completely is dependent upon the board members here. Jim has made his comment, and from what I understand, Jim, you're saying the step 3, where we're at right now and having this discussion, is might suffice for you. It's up to, those were your comments. It's up to other board members if there is a motion made. If there is no motion made, we will take this as we have had a good, thorough discussion, and we have made our points, and then we will move on to the next item on our agenda. Dr. Newman?
If I may, then, I'd like to make a motion that we move to censor the offending member at a public meeting of the full board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. And Anne Marie, do you have the motion, please, that you could read in front of you?
Dr. Newman moved to censure the offending member at a public meeting of the full board.
Does anyone have any discussion, any questions? Nikki?
Just as a clarifying question, I guess, how do you recommend that we respond to teachers who say, when we step foot on the grounds, regardless of our beliefs, we are expected to follow the protocol that you approved and put into place? I'm not sure how to respond to that, because we expect them to do it, but we aren't able to expect our board members to do this. I'm just curious how we respond, because there's a lot of hurt out there.
Jennifer?
So I think if you look back at your emails, there are hundreds of teachers that would have wanted this mask mandate removed a long time ago. So I'm not sure exactly. I mean, we've received information from Jim that 3 people had reached out maybe and wanted an explanation. And I guess I would give you the same answer as I did in governance. There are federal laws to protect people for a reason. It is nobody's business whether or not, what the medical reason is. Like, it is nobody's business. You cannot ask me that. You just can't. And so that is what you have to say. There are exemptions. It's in the law. It was in every executive order as well.
Any other questions? All right, Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
No.
Benson,
No.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
President Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. All right, we are going, well, item 7, do we need to have item 7?
Yes.
Okay, Jim, go ahead, please make a motion.
I'd like to move that the board enter executive session for the purpose of negotiation strategies permitted under North Dakota Century Code 44-04-19.1.
Is there a second? There's a second by Seth. All in favor signify by saying yes. Yes. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, we will take a 10-minute break to clear the room and get ready for our executive session. Board members and administrators are able to stay in the room. And thank you, everyone, for being here.
I just learned about it.
7:15 PM, and we're on to board reports. Dr. Newman.
Thank you. I attended the Fargo Cass Board of Health meeting on May 27th, where we approved their annual budget, and they announced their new health officer, which is myself. And to just clear up, I will no longer be able to serve on that committee as a representative of the school board. I will now be on as that. So, but it turns out their next meeting is in August, so it works out really great after we reassign committees. So we will need another school board member in that capacity. I had the pleasure and honor of handing out diplomas at South High graduation this past Sunday. It was a very cool experience. I enjoyed all of the speeches, particularly from the students. It was great just to have an in-person graduation. Yesterday, I attended virtually the Governor's Summit on Innovative Education, and I found that very informative. And then this morning, I met with Representative Carla Hansen regarding ways for the state to better support our district and some local public health efforts. Thank you.
Seth.
I have nothing to report other than I also had the honor of handing out diplomas on Sunday. David had a family emergency, so I was the only one. So luckily, I was at North instead of South or Davies. So it could have been a long day for me if I'd have been left hanging on one of those schools. But it was great, and it was a good experience. So I was pretty happy to do it.
Jennifer.
So I handed out diplomas at the GED graduation this year, and that was an honor and a pleasure. And they invited a speaker from NDSU, and I thought he did a fantastic job. His message was one of empowerment, and I really enjoyed being there. So I just want to say thank you to the staff for inviting me to participate.
Jim.
Since our last board meeting, Planning Committee met. We looked at a TIF application, I think I'm pronouncing this right, from Drucker Brew Hall. They're putting up like a hotel convention center or something. They're gonna spend $20 million on a vacant lot over there. We looked at the health insurance rates that the board approved this evening. We looked at a couple of minor things going on in our current budget. Because we had the need for a negotiation session following it, we really didn't get into our 2022 preliminary budget. That'll be the main focus of our June planning committee, because we've got to get that to the board in July for preliminary approval. I too was at the Governor's Summit yesterday. I have mixed feelings about parts of it, but some of it was really good. Some of it was, yeah, okay. And I had actually planned on being in Bismarck, but things changed and I had to stay here, so I did it virtually. And Missy and I had the tremendous honor to have a hot evening with the Woodrow Wilson students at graduation. I think it was only 103 degrees on an asphalt parking lot, but that's actually better than being in the gym at Agassiz this time of year, so it wasn't too bad. And the kids were all smiles, as always. And that's it for me.
Brian.
Couple of things. I got the privilege to hand out diplomas at Davies. One of my favorite students is Victoria Zimbrick, my stepdaughter. And it was fun to hand her that diploma. And it was also fun to watch all of the students receive their diploma that I shook hands with. And then watching Nikki. And Nikki was so kind to take pictures while we were doing the pictures with my daughter and things like that. The diploma in that was great. Also, the Davies Turf Project is really doing well from my window that I get to see. Now this morning, it looks like there's a few lakes out there, and that was really wonderful to see too. So, that's it.
Nikki.
I attended Governor Burgum's Innovative Education Summit. Enjoyed most of that. There were some questionable things. I did it virtually as well. Also had the honor of handing out diplomas at Davies, which is really exciting for the new kid in town. It was really fun to see and to be a part of. That was like a reward for getting through this year. And then several negotiation meetings. We would meet with the FEA and then we'd meet as a committee. from the Communications Engagement and Advocacy Group. We haven't met, but we have a meeting coming up next week. So I sent you all an email requesting if you have thoughts, ideas, suggestions, timing, anything that that committee could provide to you, we'd love to hear back. And we will discuss that and try to put kind of a skeleton outline together. So whoever the committee is that's going to be coming in, we'll have a jump start. Thank you.
I missed something.
Okay, Jim?
Exactly, because I didn't take the calendar out and count it, but we're running out of time. August 11th is the picnic, and if you haven't all personally collected like 20 door prizes, tomorrow is a good day to start.
I was going to mention that as well.
Please do.
Yeah, we could all use another reminder. Door prizes, door prizes, door prizes. They, and Anne Marie, you'll take them, right? Contact Anne Marie for that.
Yeah, feel free to, especially for board members who haven't done this before, feel free to bring those in as you may acquire them. I'm happy to store them and then transport them for you, no problem.
Please make sure you let Anne Marie know who donated, because we send out a thank you letter too from the district to them after the picnic.
And to build on this door prize theme again, right? We need door prizes. So anything, it can be a small gift certificate or a ticket to something, to a cooler or, you know, a t-shirt, a jacket, anything really, pretty much anything goes. So a couple things. I also was at the Woodrow Wilson graduation ceremony. On the other side of the podium from you, though. And so, yes, we shook hands, did not hand out diplomas. The diplomas were handed out, and then we shook hands. I think that maybe it wasn't so much nerves for handshaking in terms of being sweaty hands, but the heat. There was a lot of sweat dripping. So, at any rate, it was a very rewarding and cleansing opportunity at the same time. I went to the Native American Commission meeting last Thursday. 2 items to mention there is we issued a statement of solidarity with the Fargo Moorhead Muslim community, and that is following and tied to the vandalism that recently happened at the mosque over in Moorhead. And then I did share with, I believe I shared with Dr. Gross and Missy, I'm hoping I included you, and Dr. Gandhi, and Tamra, and copied, I think, to Anne Marie, a class on Indigenous inclusion that is being offered through NDSU, distance and continuing ed for K through 12 professionals. It is, the registration deadline is tomorrow, and maybe you already knew about it. It might have come through to Melody Stabner with Indian Ed, but I wasn't sure, so I thought I'd share it with you. It's open to anyone. It's $150 to register. It starts June 14th, so you don't have to be a K through 12 professional to take it. If you want to learn more about Indigenous inclusion, go ahead and sign up. I believe it's an online class. And just wanted to mention too, of course, regarding the Woodrow Wilson graduation, it's the last time that school will, that the diplomas will be handed out that say Woodrow Wilson, and they talked about that at the ceremony too. So Dakota High School will be on the diplomas for next time. And our next meeting is the 13th of July. Again, we need door prizes for that picnic. Anne Marie, you sent out an update on that. I see it's at South High. What included, is it an outside event currently planned?
Yeah, there will be options for seating both indoors and outdoors. Unfortunately, like we've mentioned before, Oak Grove Park will not be available this year. A couple other parks are also not available, so we just decided, let's just do it at one of our facilities. Some gas grills exist within our district and at South, so the folks who have helped grill before, we won't have to be doing charcoal. Which is good and bad. That great taste that is added won't be there, but maybe we'll have less singeing of arm hair and eyebrows as we've had in the past. But we will grill at South. We'll have indoor and outdoor seating, and of course we'll do door prizes and all that fun stuff. So looking forward to having you there. And I did send an email asking if anybody had availability and preferences for a sign up. We have some different things that need to be covered for that event. So.
Okay, great. Well, we are adjourned. It is 7:25 PM. Thanks, everyone.